Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Kieran James, and I'm the Managing Director of Stryde Accountancy. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to cover through the latest update from the government around COVID-19 in the UK, but specifically around the English changes in England. We're going through quite a bit around that, and some of it's around business, some of it's around some stuff that might affect us more on a personal level, and then we're going to look a little bit at the economic outlook going forward, what the Office for National Statistics has been presenting, and what the government's been looking at in their analysis as well, and then how we potentially can plan for this as well, and get our businesses ready for whatever's going to happen next. So basically, we're going to go through specific stuff around the furlough scheme. Now, most people already know about this, but just to make sure that people have a full understanding of that. The job retention bonus, which is a new scheme to support those that have furloughed staff. All the different support for hiring new staff members, which is quite exciting. Some really good stuff from the government. And then planning ahead to different things so that we know what, it's difficult at this time. There's been a lot of shuffling around of money, pushing things, deferring things. Our business has been with managing cash flow, taking loans, all these kind of things people have been doing. And it's about how do we plan our way out of this and start being really prepared for what's coming next. So the first thing I want to cover is just an update on furlough. It is now July, which means the government is still paying the tax and national insurance on furloughed employees, although you can do part-time employees. But as of August, that's going to be changing. You can still continue to part furlough your employee, but the government will stop paying tax and national insurance. There's a really useful graph there just to give you an idea of what's coming up in the future as well. So one of the new things that's happening at the moment is something called a job retention bonus. So furlough was classed as the job retention scheme and allowed us to be able to furlough staff, and the government would pay 80% of the wages on that as well. Now, this scheme is only for those employees that have gone through that furlough process. So they have to have been furloughed already. Currently, there is no indication of whether there is a minimum amount of time they should have been furloughed for. It's kind of a cover-all situation. So we are expecting that all employees will be counted in that. And if you bring an employee back to work, and during November, December of this year and January of next year, they earn at least £520 a month. Then in February, you can be entitled to claim a £1,000 grant. So it's quite nice. And obviously, you'll see from the economic indicators a little later on that one of the key issues at the moment is the concern over rising unemployment rates. So this is the government's response to try and prevent that and allow employers to keep their staff on a continuous employment all the way through to at least January. And the hope is that that will prop up the economy for that period of time a little bit longer. So what will happen is on the 31st of January, you'll submit your payroll, and then just after that, you'll be able to, once you've submitted your payroll, you'll then be able to make the claim based on that. And they're going to release more information on it around July time, or the end of July, but it's going to be autumn, so sort of August, September time before we really get full details around this. So we'll obviously keep an update webinar when we get closer to the time as well. So throughout today, if people have questions, feel free to drop it in the chat box, and we can answer any questions. That's absolutely fine. I will just pop it open now. If you can hear me okay and everything's fine, can you just drop into the chat box, just say all good? So thanks, guys. Appreciate that. So throughout this process, as I said, there's a lot of different support that's been given. And now the real focus of that support is on hiring and retaining staff. So we've got the job retention bonus. The next one is training placements. So these are work placements for 16 to 24-year-olds. Now these are already in place, okay? So we've had these for quite a few years. I know lots of businesses that have already taken advantage of these placements. But now what the government are going to do is they're going to fund these by giving businesses £1,000 per trainee they take on. Now, they have to work at least a minimum of 100 hours throughout this traineeship, and obviously it is a traineeship. So there's lots of rules around making sure it is about training. And it has a maximum of 6 months, a 6-month period. So generally this is for more entry-level positions up to sort of a level 3, and it's to help people that might, for example, be out of work for quite a period of time, or they've been on job seekers for a period of time. So it's to encourage them back into work and to get them off that area. One of the things the government announced recently is that they're going to be doubling the number of employees in the job centres, which is huge. So there's clearly an expectation that things aren't going to be hugely positive on the employment side. So things like this kind of scheme is really trying to drive people from there, particularly in that younger, less experienced part of the job market, into jobs. And there's absolutely no cost to the employer, so you don't have to pay any wages or anything like that. It's a free placement, but you can cover things like expenses. So some employers do cover things like travel or food if the trainee is out and about. Okay, are there any questions about that particular scheme? Fantastic. Okay. The next scheme is apprenticeship scheme. Now, obviously, we already have apprenticeships. The government have been pushing these quite hard. So currently, you can already have apprenticeships in your business, and and for a lot of industries, it's an extremely useful way of bringing in new talent. I know in our business, we brought in 2 apprentices last year, and it's been fantastic for us. They've been really good and have grown really well with the business. To encourage more business leaders to take on apprenticeships, the government offering £2,000 for any new apprenticeships for those that are under 25 years old, and £1,500 for those that are over 25 years old. So that fund goes to the business themselves. So this will start from the 1st of August, and you still have to pay the normal apprenticeship national minimum wage, which is £4.15 per hour, with a minimum of at least 30 hours. Already, if you get an apprentice at 16 to 18, there is £1,000 grant for that as well. So there is additional funding as well that this is basically adding on top of. So there's quite a lot of support being thrown at this apprenticeship route. Again, most of these are for the sort of under 25s, although there is now, obviously you can do apprenticeships for over 25s as well. So don't forget about that as well, even for people retraining. Now, my personal favorite of all of these is the Kickstart scheme. This is for those who you can take on those who are 16 to 24 years old for a work placement. Now, that is to help them learn and develop. Now, in our own business's life cycle, we've used work placement students to help in lots of different ways. They've themselves have had fantastic personal growth through our business and gone on to do lots of different things, whether it's just changing their course that they're on because they find what they really like and are interested in, or moving into more entry-level positions in other businesses. So I'm a believer in this kind of model. This is specifically for those who are on universal credit or at risk of unemployment, of long-term unemployment. They have to be paid national minimum wage, and you have to work for at least 25 hours per week. Okay, but the government will pay their wages, their pensions, and the employer's national insurance. Okay, so we haven't got a lot of details around this, but so far from the top level view, this seems to be a really interesting scheme for lots of employers to begin the process of bringing people into your business. Now, the government will pay that, I believe it's about 6 months, if I remember rightly, about 6 months for that. I'll send a link when we send this out just for clarity as well. And I think for a lot of businesses, particularly those that are either early stage starting or at the point where hiring an employee is not quite viable, and caution over the next couple of months would prevent them from taking that employee, this could give them an opportunity to really look at bringing somebody on board and taking that jump to drive their business forward. So I think this is a really, really useful scheme. If this is all making sense, just drop in the chat and let me know. Good, thank you. Now, I know that lots of businesses this won't be relevant for, but I still want to cover it because it is going to be relevant for us as individuals, and that is some of these changes to VAT. Now, VAT registered businesses currently pay 20%. Within certain industries, so hospitality, hotel and holiday accommodation, and some sort of admissions to certain attractions, that's going to be temporarily dropped for 6 months to 5%. So there'll be a 5% VAT. And that's going to apply from the 15th of July this year to the 12th of January next year. So this is, it should, if it works right, pass a cost saving onto us as individuals in these particular areas. And clearly the aim here, because these industries have pretty much been decimated over the last couple of months, is to encourage people to spend back into these economies, these parts of the economy. These make up a huge and a significant part of the economy, and therefore spending in them is really going to make sure that there's jobs still in that area. There's lots of employment in there, and they're spending in and around that area as well. So the three parts that breaks it down into. So the first one is in and around takeaway food. I've broken it down here, but effectively the 5% is going to be on any hot and cold food consumed on premise, also drinks, because hot and cold drinks consumed on premise that are not alcoholic, and also on takeaways as well. So any takeaway sort of food or hot drinks consumed off premise, so teas, coffees, these sorts of things will be included in that. So we might be able to get some cheaper teas and coffees. Sounds good. Also, from an accommodation and hotel perspective, basically anywhere, any hotels, accommodations, B&Bs, boarding houses, all these sorts of things, caravans, tents, all of this is going to, the VAT rate's being reduced now as well. And obviously the government's aim here is to really try and drive that staycation approach, so people do choose to go out and still go on holiday this year. I do expect there's probably going to be a lot of people looking to get out and about and go and go on holiday. We started to see the first of my connections going on holiday, some of it abroad, but most of it in the UK, obviously because of the fears around safety and things like that. So hopefully that should transfer to us and holidays should be cheaper. It's quite interesting actually, because one of the things that throughout this period we have seen is debt across the consumer, the span of all consumers all households has gone down on aggregate, and the savings that people have has also gone up. So I think that going forward, what we're going to see is people will use that cash to spend on holidays. And I do expect these sectors to get a boom in them because of that, and that will in turn prop up the economy in further ways. Just add a comment here. It will be interesting to see if the VAT savings are passed on to the consumer or whether they are absorbed into the business. Yeah, do you know what? That's a very, very good point. I think here's the challenge with this economically, because I think initially we'll see the VAT savings, absolutely. The problem is when we're not traveling abroad and we're coming to stay in the UK or looking to buy stuff more in the UK, there is only so much supply that can happen, particularly during the summer months. We know that during the summer months, because demand goes up and supply does not change, or not by much, that prices then increase. So I do expect there to still be the normal seasonal fluctuations in price, although I think it'll probably last slightly longer than it would normally last till about September. I think it'll probably push into October, November time, as people start to come out of this and want to take holidays while it's still fairly good weather. But yeah, that's a really good question. We don't know what it's going to be like, but I think that there could definitely be some interesting. I think at first we're definitely going to see a dip, definitely as businesses are striving to get new clients. Whether in 6 months' time that's still the case, I don't know, which is probably why they've done it temporarily. The next one is attractions. So shows, theatres, circuses, fairs. You can read the list there. It doesn't apply to sporting events, unfortunately, but that's a lot of events that they're trying to obviously drive the culture. They've put a lot of money as well on the back of this into the culture side of our economy to try and drive people back into those areas. Clearly trying to avoid us having a gap in culture, even little things like making sure that we don't have that certain buildings can't be demolished during this time. because of their importance. You know, they're putting quite a lot of effort into making sure that we can go out and do these things. So it's a hard one though, isn't it? Because on one side of me, I'm looking at this and going, the government are really encouraging us to get out there and do stuff. And then on the other side of it, they're saying, stay safe, be at home, you know, try and limit the amount of social contact you've had. Now, obviously, places like concerts, theatres, you know, they've got rules and regulations they're going to have to abide by and guidelines, and there's going to be social distancing involved. So we are going to be moving into a time of where we're going to have to be more careful still. But there in some ways, there's a bit of a conflict or a contradiction here in the two sides of the coin. And I think that's definitely going to affect, I suppose, and I think the thing that will affect that will be people's perception of safety. So the more people perceive it to be safe, the more likely these measures are to be successful. The less likely people perceive it to be safe, probably the less likely they'll be successful. And I think that will directly then affect the economy, my personal opinion. Another thing, again, for us on a more of a personal level, although it will definitely help some restaurants, is there's going to be the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Now, basically, this means that there's discounts for eating at restaurants. So for those restaurants that choose to sign up to this, all day on a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you can get up to 50% per person off your meal, up to £10 per person. And you can use that as many times as you want. So, and that'll be for the month of August, so 3rd to 31st of August. So there's clearly an encouragement that by July, we're still kind of in this middle phase, but clearly when you start to look at all these measures they're putting in place together, there's a drive towards the economy restarting in August. I think that's quite an important indicator for us as all businesses, that the government are driving people to do this, which means there's clearly a desire to get things up and running as quick as possible now, rather than delay things longer. I know that Boris talked about the schools starting in September. They've reinstated the fines for people who don't turn up to schools now, so it's not going to be a choice anymore about keeping your kids, choosing whether you go to school or keep your kids at home. So clearly there's this momentum towards August, September time being the time where our economy is going to be back up to speed, or at least an attempt at that. Now it's interesting. Recently, you would have there was a bit of a pause in property prices, etc., and property movement. But actually, and most of that was because of lockdown, because people couldn't get out to actually make the sales. But now there's actually been a bit of a boom in property, and we don't know if that's partly to do with the fact that things have been delayed. We know that the price of properties are increasing generally. Now that normally happens in a market that's more booming. Recession actually normally has the opposite effect. So that's been quite interesting. And I wonder whether over the next couple of 6 months or so, whether that will reverse itself as it's less of a bounce back from the time of no sales or less sales to now a time where people are able to make those purchasing decisions. But again, to support that side of the economy, what's happened is currently you pay stamp duty on any any purchase over £125,000 of property. For residential only, they're going to be taking that stamp duty, so you don't need to pay it until you hit a property value of 500,000. This is specifically for those who are buying a new home and it's their main home. Now this for some people at the higher end of that, this could save up to £15,000 on a purchase. So it is going to help drive slightly more home purchases throughout the process. So I definitely think it will do that. And it's basically, it started immediately. So this is any purchases made now right up to the 31st of March 2021. So it's still, there's obviously all these measures are in place looking at the most affected parts of the economy and trying to counteract them. The challenge is, like everything, most of this is all based on perception, and the true sort of weight of the economy is going to be based on how, as both the government, the media, but also as businesses, we can give people confidence in making purchasing decisions. I think that's going to be the real key. So now what I want to do, I just want to run through, that's the kind of the guidelines side of things and what the updates are. I want to go through some of the economic indicators that I've seen at the moment. Most of these are pulled from various parts of the Office for National Statistics reports. And I'll sort of anecdotally talk about some of the other government stuff as well, and the other analysis that they've discussed. So this first report here is around footfall in stores. And you'll notice that obviously, as soon as lockdown began, around sort of 22nd of March, the footfall in, well, actually from the PM's announcement, the footfall dropped significantly in stores. So if I do that around this sort of date, lockdown began around here. What's happened is slowly over that time, we've had slightly further increase but people that are coming into stores and things, as certain types of stores and non-essential shops have been allowed to be open. We can see that there was a boost around the 14th of June, and that's kind of remained fairly steady so far, as you can see. It'll be interesting. We're still probably a good 2 or 3 weeks away from really seeing the effects of the more recent changes on the 4th of July. But it is interesting to see that it hasn't really grown significantly since the 14th of June. So I think that there's still definitely some concern amongst the public. There's still some caution about going out and about. But I would expect, the hope is that will increase now as more and more things start to open, gyms, swimming pools, all these kind of things, as people get back to sort of what is effectively normal life. Feel free, if anyone has any thoughts or comments they want to chip in and drop it on the chat, feel free to do so if you've got your own thoughts. This is my obviously just personal views of stuff. So the next one is job adverts. So the top line you see there is 2019 and the bottom one is 2020. So these are the number of jobs being advertised across all industries. And what you'll notice is since March, or just before March, there's been a significant decline in the number of jobs being advertised. So people are not hiring as much as they were. Now that lends itself. So last week we did an interview with Matt Sedgwick from Key Focus Consulting, and we were talking about talent attraction and the new market. So prior to lockdown, what we had a candidate-driven market. Effectively, there was, for most jobs, there were few candidates and lots of people trying to get those candidates. Okay, so candidates had the ability to be able to almost pick and choose. They probably had 2 or 3 job offers at a time, and that obviously increased everything from wages to the kind of perks you had to offer, all this kind of stuff. Now that market's changed quite considerably. There's very much now going to be, as employers, we're going to have a lot more candidates per job. We're going to have probably a higher average caliber of candidates per job, which means we're going to have to make harder decisions about picking the right staff. Okay, so good talent pool, but harder decisions about making sure we get the right one. So it means that interview process might have to be more robust. We might have to put more measures in place to filter and qualify out those that fit and those that don't. I think, and this is only a personal opinion, I think that will naturally affect wages to some degree as well, particularly in things that are not entry level. I think entry level is hard to change, but particularly in sort of industries where there are a lot of candidates. And I don't know which industries there'll be at the moment, but there's going to be some industries throughout this process that will be seen as a nice to have rather than a necessity. So people may be brought on as contractors, or they'll be, people will be pushed out. Now, normally training, for example, has always been an industry where that happens during recessions. So that could be something that happens within particularly larger corporate businesses, middle management, that type of stuff is normally the level. Okay, so this report here is the quarterly VAT turnover index. So basically, they report on all the people that submit VAT, all the government companies that submit VAT returns, and what do they submit. And you'll notice that across the board, as of Q2 this year, that's decreased quite significantly, the reporting of that. So over time, it's generally steadily stays the same or rises ever so slightly across time. But it's now dropped quite significantly. So we know that businesses' turnover across the board are being significantly affected. And so far, we haven't seen much of a change in that. What we have seen here is really interesting, which is, so this is a table showing those businesses that are trading at the moment, those that are paused or closed, And this is obviously as of the 5th of July, and all businesses together, excluding those that are sort of permanently cease trading. So what we've said is 88% of businesses are trading, which is fantastic. And of those, only 16% of people are on furlough. So you can see that those that are sort of closed or paused trading, most of them have furloughed their staff. A lot of businesses are providing top-up. So about 40% of businesses across the board are providing top-ups. And there's quite a significant amount of the workforce that are benefiting from the coronavirus job retention scheme. Here's something that's almost quite concerning, really, which is even across the businesses, even those that are currently trading and those that have sort of closed shop, you can see that here 66%, here 46% of businesses have less than 6 months cash reserves. That does lend itself to quite a concerning point of view when you're looking at the economy and the fact that we're probably at least 3 or 4 months away from full release of lockdown measures, as I've said, August, September, and then people will still be furloughed all the way up till October time. So there's still going to be some partial lockdowns. Businesses that can trade at the moment will be trading at reduced rates because the number of covers that restaurants can do will be less. The amount of seating in any sort of training or show type, cinema type environment will be less. Shops will have to be managing that process, one in, one out type process, and these sorts of things. So there's going to be quite a lot of reduced trading. So that is for me, I think that's quite a particular concern. And probably even more so is the 20% of businesses that actually don't even know how long they've got. That puts quite a large, only 32% of businesses probably have the cash to really be strong throughout this period. And finally, obviously, clearly there's a lot of businesses are applying to government schemes and taking advantage of the schemes, which is that's just quite a useful, interesting thing to know. So, as a general rule, I thought it was interesting. This was really a really interesting graph to see what has been the effect of turnover on these businesses. So some businesses turnover has increased by more than 50%, which is fantastic. Some is, clearly there's about 11-12% of businesses that turnover has still increased. So actually it's slightly more than originally predicted. It was about 7% in around April time. So there are a proportion of the economy that are getting back up and running and their turnover is doing all right. But that's still allowed for 40, 57% of businesses whose turnover has gone down throughout this process. So, I'm one of those people that I'm always glasses half full. And I believe if you start talking about recession, it will happen because, perception is everything with these sorts of things. But I think we have to at some point, you have to make the decision to be prepared for worst case scenarios. And right now, I think that it's going to be quite important for us as businesses to look at how we prepare our businesses for a potential recession and what steps we're going to take to make sure that whatever happens during that process, we come out of it strong. And this, looking at what the stuff the government have done, the moves they've made, it's very good. It's really good, but it still has mainly focused on the up to 25-year-olds. So there's still a huge proportion of the economy that might be out of jobs that they haven't focused on, and that this could affect this. When people go off furlough, people are going to struggle to keep some of those employees on. Another question, I wonder how banks are looking at the reserves. I would imagine the banks will be the first stop when things really get hard. Any thoughts on how the banks are looking at things? Right now, I think most of the banks are still caught up very much in providing loans. Obviously, a bank's business model is built on giving loans to in a safe, constructive way where they can receive more back. That's their model, is the interest model. So at the moment, I know a lot of banks are still caught up in that, trying to do that. The government have supported banks. So what they've done is they've kept certain rates in the background down to make sure that banks, or to encourage banks to continue to lend going forward. So they have been in conversation with banks throughout this time, trying to ensure banks do continue to lend and give people borrowing. I personally think, at least in the short term, banks will be quite open to this. And the reason for that is that overall lending has been reducing. Therefore, the income the banks are receiving will have been reducing from those, from a personal perspective. The lending from the banks for things like the bounce back loan, although still 2% the government are paying, it's not a huge amount compared to what they would get lending in other markets, through normal routes. So I think at least in the short term, they will continue to lend. If we do see the kind of dips that the government are projecting, and if unemployment continues to go, that will also affect the economy. Then I think that there will be a time at which they're going to have to pull in their belts like they did in 2008. Although we're not going to, in 2008 it was very much a clear drop, and suddenly everything was in trouble. We knew about it. I think we're going to see this over probably a slightly more prolonged time, as each of the measures dwindles and businesses start to see the effects of not trading for a couple of months or a significant period of reduced trading. Having said that, one of the things we've seen throughout this process is a lot of businesses who have leaned up. They've really tightened their belts on their costs. That is partly staff resources. It is also partly on other spending, non-necessary spending, things like subscriptions you sign up to and don't continue. You just keep going even though you don't use it. Those sorts of things. So we have seen a lot that have pulled their belts in. So I would expect that some of those businesses will be supported because although their turnover is down, we're seeing some industries where that is the case, but their costs have also reduced so significantly that they're still making just as much or more profit. So how can we prepare? Now, I've just pulled together some ideas that I've had. I've had a little bit of a scour on the internet around what's happened throughout the last couple of recessions, what industries have done well, what industries haven't done well, and just ways of preparing. And we've looked at how businesses over the last couple of months have prepared and what they've done that's been I consider to be quite useful, basically. So the first thing is we think the talent pool is going to will increase, and that's mainly because of our conversation with Matt. The talent pool is going to go up, so be prepared that there are opportunities to hire staff. The government are they've already provided support. They will continue to provide more support by the look of it. There's a clear aim at propping up this economy. I expect to see more measures going forward, particularly around employment. I do think that some of the measures that they've tried to take are good, but have been tried before and didn't work. So in the necessity of the now, it may work, but they may be bringing in more measures in and around that sector or that area. One of the things we've been banging on about all the way through this process, from even slightly before lockdown, is the importance of when there's uncertainty and most people pull back from marketing, that's the time to increase your marketing and your advertising spend. So there's a bit of a balancing act here, and there has to be a focus obviously on return on investment. I can see a lot of people branding less and marketing more, but there needs to be a focus on making sure that you're in the customer's eyes, and if they are going to spend, they're spending it with you. Also, by building that relationship now, there's a lot of companies that grew out of good marketing budgets during a recession. Even companies like Google and Airbnb are obvious ones to talk about. One of the things we see successful businesses doing over a long period of time is they get so caught up in particularly fast-growing businesses in growing fast. They're not always aware of the drain that some customers take on them. This is particularly relevant for service-based businesses or any businesses that have sort of retainer type clients. And it's going to be really important for businesses to start reviewing the profitability of each of their customers, and also potentially reviewing the profitability of their products and services they offer in general, and looking to deliver products and services that are obviously both relevant to the client but do maximize profitability. So I expect we'll probably see a lot of particularly large organizations putting back to the core like they did in 2008, closing off some of their wider, less core products, and then putting it back to just really focusing on doing the core stuff, doing the stuff they know very well. Also, during a recession process, you never know when you're coming out of the recession. It just kind of happens. So it's really important that any sort of research and development happens during that recession process. So you're developing your products, you're looking for new ways of working, you're testing and measuring new different things so that you've proven it before we come out of any recession process. Because by the time you come out of the recession, you want to be hitting the ground running, and that those marketing methods, that service delivery to be, all those new products to be flying at that point, not still trying to figure out which one's the right one to be really investing in. So research and development, really key. Is this all making sense? So some additional stuff I think that's quite interesting at this point is it's inevitable that through the next couple of months, there are going to be some businesses that are not going to survive. We've already started to see it. And that means that there are opportunities, there are going to be opportunities to purchase businesses at reduced rates, to obtain customers from businesses that have closed down and they do not have support, or to merge with other organizations to take advantage of economies of scale or multiple, cross-sharing different channels to benefit from sort of the same customer base but multiple products into that customer base. So I can see there's going to be a potential opportunity for that. I think it will be important for us to keep a focus and contact with any ideal prospects, I shouldn't say clients, prospects, as a lot of prospects are going to start to look to switch suppliers. So people will look for example, if their supplier is going to go down, they'll be looking for where's next. Even if people are with very, very large suppliers and there's a big news article that talks about a rocky time, people might jump just on those perceptions. So it's going to be important that if there is a kind of a perfect client or perfect prospect and you don't have on board at the moment, to keep in touch with them. It's also going to be important to review those business critical suppliers and say sales channels. So are those business critical suppliers going to be still around in 2-3 years time, even in 6 months time? Now, this is more important for things like making sure that you don't get caught out with, for example, if you're building products and one of your suppliers for those products is could go bust and they're the only one in the UK, for example. It's going to be important to start looking at making sure we've got alternative sources and plans in place so that we're prepared for potential challenges in the market, basically. And the final thing I want to talk about on this before just jumping into a graph again is reviewing processes. We all spend time looking at our processes, and over time they get better and better. I know a lot of people during COVID-19 and lockdown have spent a significant amount of time looking at these. I really love a methodology called lean management. It came about from the Toyota in Japan and how they look to reduce what's called waste. So basically any part of your business that is not directly related to adding value to the customer, it's removing that part from your business. And I think now's a really good time for business leaders to look at the waste in their business and seeing how they can remove that. So there's some thoughts on preparation. If you have any other thoughts, please do let me know. Or if you're watching this back on YouTube, please do put some thoughts in the comments. It's great to hear it. Now I showed this about 2.5 months ago at the beginning of lockdown, and I think it now more than ever it might help some people, and it might sink in with others that perhaps it didn't sink in with before. The single most important time to keep marketing and keep in contact with your customers and keep attention of prospects is during a recession. You can see here this bottom line indicates those that basically did effectively either slowed down or kept going at a relatively stable rate during a recession. And the top one is those people that really wanted to come out of that recession like a race car turning out of a corner with the maximum amount of acceleration so they can really drive their business forward. But what I took was during this time, delayed gratification, during this bit of that process. Lots of hard work, lots of dedication to keeping in touch with clients and prospects, lots of attraction strategies to make sure people knew about who they were, what they were selling, and the values of that, so that when people had the money to spend, they were the first people they went to and spent with. I think that's a really nice, just a really nice graph to show what I think is the next stages of our business cycle and what we need to do. And in line with that, it means we need to plan. So things like if people have deferred their VAT, if people have their payment on account has been delayed until January, all these kind of things, we need to be making sure we're preparing as businesses to cash flow forecast for all these eventualities and these things that we have perhaps taken as a necessity or have done as a necessity to keep business going. Now's the time we need to make sure that there's a plan in place of when these are going to get paid back, how loans are going to be paid, and what strategy are being taken to finance all of these things. So I hope that's been really useful for everyone. Please, if you're watching it on YouTube, please subscribe. And for those that have watched it live today, thanks so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. I'm going to wait for about 1 minute for any more questions. If you do have one, please do drop them in the chat. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time.